She thought switching a name tag would buy her one night of peace. She was wrong. What Madison Clark didn't know was that the name she borrowed belonged to someone the most dangerous man in the city had been waiting to meet. And when Aidan Volkov's eyes found hers across that glittering ballroom, her carefully constructed lie became the first thread in a web she couldn't escape. This is a story about identity, power, and the terrifying moment when a stranger sees through every mask you've ever worn and decides you're worth the risk. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a comment below and tell us where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe. This story will change everything you think you know about dangerous men and the women who refuse to be owned by them. The Grand Meridian Hotel glittered like a cage made of crystal and ambition. Madison Clark stood at the registration desk, staring at the name tag in her hand as if it were a live grenade. Madison Clark, Junior Marketing Associate, Arclight Media. The laminated rectangle felt heavier than it should, weighted with 3 years of mediocrity, failed pitches, and the soul-crushing awareness that she was 28 and still nobody. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight she just needed to not be seen. "Madison?" The voice sliced through her thoughts like a blade through silk. She didn't turn. She didn't breathe. She knew that voice. The false warmth, the performative concern that had once fooled her into thinking he was decent. Ryan, her ex-fiancé, the man who'd left her 2 weeks before their wedding for his yoga instructor, then had the audacity to send her a LinkedIn connection request 6 months later with the message, "No hard feelings, right?" She felt her pulse spike, her vision narrowing to a pinpoint. The ballroom stretched out before her, 500 corporate professionals in tailored suits and cocktail dresses, all pretending they weren't sizing each other up like wolves at a watering hole. Ryan was somewhere in that crowd, probably with her, the flexible blonde who'd stolen her future and replaced it with humiliation. Madison's fingers tightened on the name tag. Then she saw it. On the registration table, partially hidden beneath a stack of event programs, was another name tag. Sleek, expensive, printed on heavier cardstock with embossed gold lettering. Elena Morozov, executive consultant, Volkov Industries. Madison didn't think. She didn't plan, she just moved. Her hand swept across the table, palming the Elena Morozov tag, while dropping her own into the discard pile meant for unclaimed badges. The swap took 3 seconds. The woman at the registration desk didn't even glance up from her tablet. Madison pinned the new name tag to her black dress, a simple sheath that cost 2 months' rent, and still somehow made her feel invisible, and walked into the ballroom before her conscience could catch up with her cowardice. The event was a charity gala masquerading as a networking opportunity, the kind of affair where everyone pretended to care about underprivileged children while calculating the value of every handshake. Madison had been invited because Arclight Media had purchased a table, and her boss needed warm bodies to fill seats. She'd debated skipping entirely, but hiding at home felt like admitting Ryan still had power over her. So here she was, wearing someone else's name, pretending to be someone she wasn't. The irony wasn't lost on her. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and drifted toward the perimeter of the room, where shadows gathered between the pillars and the lighting was kinder. The band played something instrumental and forgettable. Laughter rose and fell in waves. Madison scanned the crowd, searching for Ryan's face, her body tense with the instinct to flee. She didn't see him. What she saw instead was a man who didn't belong. He stood near the far wall, surrounded by space that seemed to bend around him. Not empty space, there were people nearby, circling like satellites, afraid to get too close. But there was distance, intentional, controlled. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood architecture. Charcoal grey, no tie, the collar of his white shirt open just enough to suggest he hadn't dressed to impress anyone. His hair was dark, slightly too long, brushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone-sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark, unreadable, fixed on her. Madison froze. She told herself she was imagining it, that he was looking past her, at someone more important, someone who actually belonged in a room like this. But when she shifted slightly to the left, his gaze followed. He wasn't looking past her. He was looking at her. Her pulse kicked up, a rabbit-fast rhythm that made her champagne glass tremble. She forced herself to break eye contact, turning toward the nearest cluster of guests and pretending to be fascinated by their conversation about quarterly earnings and market disruption. But she could still feel him watching. The sensation crawled over her skin like a shadow with weight. "Eleanor!" The voice came from behind her, deep, controlled, with an accent that softened the vowels and sharpened the consonants into something faintly Slavic. Madison's entire body went rigid. She turned slowly, champagne glass clutched like a shield, and found herself face to face with the man from across the room. Up close, he was worse. Not worse in appearance, if anything. He was more devastating at this range, all brutal elegance and restrained power, but worse in presence. In the way he occupied space, as if he owned not just the room, but the air inside it. His eyes swept over her face, clinical and thorough, cataloguing details she wasn't sure she wanted him to notice. "I'm sorry," Madison said, voice steadier than she felt. "I think you have me confused with someone else." His head tilted slightly, a movement so subtle it barely registered. "Do I?" Her throat tightened. "Yes." He glanced down at her name tag, at the embossed gold letters that spelled out a lie. Elena Morozov. When his eyes lifted back to hers, something flickered in their depths, amusement maybe, or recognition of a game she didn't know she was playing. "My mistake," he said quietly. He didn't move, didn't step back. The space between them felt compressed, airless. Madison's instinct screamed at her to walk away, to apologize and disappear into the crowd before this conversation could go anywhere dangerous. But something in his expression held her in place, a quiet intensity that felt less like threat and more like inevitability. "You're with Volkov Industries," he said. Not a question, an observation. "I'm consulting," Madison replied, the lie forming before she could stop it. "Interesting." His gaze didn't waver. "I didn't realize Elena had been replaced." Every muscle in Madison's body locked. Replaced. As in, Elena Morozov wasn't here. As in, whoever this man was, he'd been expecting to meet the real Elena, and Madison had just walked into her place wearing her name like stolen jewelry. "I'm not replacing anyone," Madison said carefully. "I'm just filling in. For tonight." "Yes?" "Because Elena couldn't attend." Madison's mind raced, searching for an exit that wouldn't expose her completely. She had a conflict. What kind of conflict? "I'm not at liberty to say." His mouth curved barely, almost imperceptibly, into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Discretion, I appreciate that." He extended a hand. Long fingers. No rings. A callus along the edge of his palm that suggested he'd done something more physical than signing contracts. "Aiden Volkov," he said. The world tilted. Madison's breath stalled in her chest. Volkov, as in Volkov Industries, as in the company Elena Morozov supposedly worked for, as in the man standing in front of her wasn't just another guest at this event. He was the reason Elena's name tag had been printed on expensive cardstock with embossed gold lettering. He was her boss. Or her client. Or something worse. Madison forced herself to take his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and lasted exactly 2 seconds longer than professional courtesy required. "Eleanor," she said, the name tasting like ashes on her tongue. "I know." His eyes held hers, and in that moment Madison understood with perfect clarity that Aiden Volkov knew she was lying. He knew. And he was letting her continue anyway. "I've been looking forward to meeting you," Aiden said, releasing her hand but not stepping back. "Your reputation precedes you." "Does it?" Not a question. She didn't trust herself to ask questions. Efficient, discreet, uncompromising. He paused, studying her face as if comparing it to a photograph he'd memorized. "I was told you don't attend events like this." "I don't," Madison said before she could think better of it. "Then why are you here?" "Because I was running from my ex-fiancé. Because I switched name tags on impulse. Because I'm an idiot who makes terrible decisions under pressure." "I made an exception," she said instead. "For me?" "For the cause." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. A flicker of interest, or perhaps the recognition that she was better at this than he'd expected. "Walk with me," Aiden said. It wasn't a request. Madison's every instinct told her to refuse, to make an excuse, retrieve her real name tag, and disappear before this situation spiraled further out of control. But Aiden Volkov was already moving, cutting through the crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who knew people would step aside. And they did. Madison followed, her heels clicking against marble, her pulse a steady drumbeat of warning. They passed through the ballroom, through a set of double doors and out onto a terrace overlooking the city. The night air was cool, sharp with the scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. Below them, the city sprawled in layers of light and shadow, a glittering maze that felt both infinite and suffocating. Aiden stopped at the railing, hands resting lightly on the stone. He didn't look at her. "Do you know why I wanted to meet Elena Morozov?" he asked. Madison's mouth went dry. "I assume you had business to discuss." "Business," he repeated as if tasting the word. "Yes, business that requires absolute trust. Trust is earned." "It is." He turned to face her, and the city lights caught in his eyes, turning them molten, which is why I find it curious that the woman standing in front of me isn't Elena Morozov. Madison's heart stopped. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the words came out thin, unconvincing. "Your hands," Aiden said softly. "Elena has a scar on her left hand, burn mark from a kitchen accident in Moscow. You don't." Madison looked down at her hands, pale and unmarked, betraying her completely. "Your posture," Aiden continued. "Elena was a ballet dancer before she went into consulting. She stands differently, moves differently. You don't." He stepped closer. "And your eyes," he said, his voice dropping to something quieter, more dangerous. "When I said my name, your pupils dilated, not with recognition, with fear." Madison's breath came shallow, her mind spinning through excuses, explanations, apologies, none of them good enough. "I can explain," she whispered. "I'm sure you can." Aiden's gaze pinned her in place, but not here, not now. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, matte black, embossed with a single phone number. "Tomorrow," he said, pressing the card into her hand. "Noon, there's an address on the back." Madison stared at the card, at the cold weight of it in her palm. "And if I don't come?" Aiden's expression didn't change, but his next words settled over her like a cage door closing. "Then I'll find you anyway." He turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving Madison alone on the terrace with a stolen name, a stranger's business card, and the sinking realization that she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. Madison didn't sleep. For 2 nights she lay in her apartment, a cramped studio in a building where the heating barely worked, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every moment of the gala in excruciating detail. The name tag, the swap, Aiden Volkov's eyes cutting through her lie like a scalpel through skin. Your pupils dilated, not with recognition, with fear. She'd left the gala 10 minutes after their conversation, abandoning her champagne and her borrowed identity in a panicked retreat that felt less like escape and more like delay. Because he'd been right. About all of it. She wasn't Elena Morozov. She was nobody. A junior marketing associate who'd committed identity theft out of cowardice and was now facing consequences she couldn't begin to calculate. At 6 a.m., Madison gave up on sleep. She showered, dressed in jeans and a sweater that made her feel small and forgettable, and sat at her kitchen table with Aiden's business card laid out in front of her like evidence at a crime scene. Matte black. No name, just a phone number on the front and an address on the back, written in clean, precise handwriting. 1447 Ashford Place, noon. Madison had looked up the address on her phone at 2 a.m., unable to resist the pull of morbid curiosity. It was in the financial district, a part of the city where buildings wore glass like armor and security cameras tracked every breath. The specific location appeared to be a private office complex, no business name listed, no public reviews. Just an austere grey tower that looked like it housed either billionaires or people who made billionaires nervous. She told herself she wouldn't go. She told herself it was insane to walk into a stranger's territory after being caught in a lie that could be interpreted as fraud, impersonation, or corporate espionage, depending on how vindictive Aiden Volkov wanted to be. But at 11:15 a.m., Madison was standing on the subway platform, card clutched in her fist, her reflection staring back at her from the grimy train windows. She looked terrified. She was terrified, but she got on the train anyway. The building at 1447 Ashford Place was worse than the photos suggested. It rose 30 stories, all steel and black glass, with the kind of architectural minimalism that screamed money without apology. The lobby was Arctic white marble floors, recessed lighting, a security desk manned by 2 men in suits who looked less like guards and more like soldiers in civilian dress. Madison approached the desk, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "I have an appointment," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. The guard didn't look up. "Name?" Madison hesitated. "Madison Clark." Now he looked up. His eyes swept over her, assessing, cataloging, before he glanced at a tablet embedded in the desk surface. "So you're listed as a Volkov guest," he said after a beat. 32nd floor, elevator on the right, you'll be met." "By who?" He didn't answer. Madison crossed the lobby on legs that felt like they'd forgotten how to hold her weight. The elevator was waiting, doors open, as if it had been expecting her. She stepped inside. The doors closed with a whisper of hydraulics, and the car began to rise. She watched the numbers climb, 20th floor, 25th, 30th. The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a space that didn't look like an office. It looked like a private residence, high ceilings, dark wood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The furniture was minimal: a leather sofa, a glass coffee table, a single abstract painting on the far wall that probably cost more than Madison's annual salary. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper, expensive cologne or the ghost of cigar smoke. And standing by the windows, backlit by noon sun, was Aiden Volkov. He turned as she stepped out of the elevator. "You came," he said. "You didn't leave me much choice." "There's always a choice." He gestured toward the sofa. "Sit." Madison stayed standing. "I'd rather not." "Suit yourself." He moved toward her, not quickly, not aggressively, but with the kind of calm inevitability that made her heart rate spike. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. "Do you know what Elena Morozov does for Volkov Industries?" Aiden asked. "Consulting," Madison said, the word automatic. "Consulting," he repeated, his tone flat. "That's your answer." "That's what the name tag said." "The name tag you stole." Madison's jaw tightened. "I didn't steal it, I borrowed it." "Without permission, without knowledge of what it represented." His gaze didn't waver. "Do you understand what you walked into last night?" "Their corporate event." "A negotiation," Aiden corrected. "Elena Morozov was supposed to be my intermediary for a deal worth $30 million. Her presence was confirmation that certain parties were willing to move forward. Her absence, or replacement, sends a very different message." The air left Madison's lungs. $30 million. She'd borrowed the identity of someone involved in a $30 million deal. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Obviously." Aiden stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets. "But ignorance doesn't erase consequence." "What do you want from me?" "Information. Why did you take the name tag?" Madison's throat tightened. The truth felt too small, too pathetic to speak out loud. "Because I was running from my ex-fiancée. Because I wanted to be invisible. Because I'm a coward." "I wanted to avoid someone," she said finally. "Who?" "That's not your business. Everything that happens in my vicinity becomes my business." His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "Who were you avoiding?" Madison met his eyes, frustration cutting through fear. "My ex-fiancé. He was at the event. I didn't want him to see me." "So you became someone else?" "Yes." "Did it work?" She blinked. "What?" "Did he see you?" "No." "Then your plan succeeded." Aiden tilted his head slightly. "At significant cost." Madison's hands curled into fists. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interfere with your deal. I'll leave. You'll never see me again." "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" Aiden studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Sit," he said again. This time Madison obeyed. She sank onto the leather sofa, her body tense, her mind racing through scenarios, none of them good. Aiden moved to the bar cart near the window and poured 2 glasses of water. He returned, handing one to her before taking the chair across from the sofa. "Elena Morozov is missing," he said. Madison's stomach dropped. "Missing?" "She disappeared 3 days ago. No phone calls, no messages, no electronic trail." He sipped his water, his gaze never leaving hers. "I assumed she'd been compromised, taken by a competitor, or worse. And now?" "Now I'm not sure." His eyes narrowed. "Because you appeared wearing her name with no apparent knowledge of who she was or what she represented, which means either you're the most incompetent spy I've ever encountered, or you're exactly what you claim to be." "I'm not a spy." "Then what are you?" "Nobody," Madison said, the word bitter. I work in marketing. I make $38,000 a year. I live in a studio apartment with bad heating and worse plumbing. I'm nobody." Aidan leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting into something that might have been curiosity. "Nobody," he repeated, "and yet you walked into a room full of powerful people, wearing a name that doesn't belong to you, and held a conversation with me without breaking. I was terrified." "You hid it well." Madison set her water glass down before her trembling hands could betray her. "What happens now?" "Now," Aidan said slowly, "you help me find Elena. I don't know where she is, but you know how to be her." He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. "The people I was supposed to meet last night saw you. They believe you are Elena Morozov. If the truth comes out, the deal collapses, and the people who lose money won't accept explanations." Madison's pulse thundered. "You want me to keep pretending?" "Yes." "That's insane." "It's necessary. I don't know anything about consulting. I don't know anything about your business. I'll be exposed in 5 minutes. You'll be briefed." "By who?" "By me." Madison stood abruptly, her body flooding with adrenaline. "I'm not doing this. Find someone else." "There is no one else." Aidan rose to his full height, and the space between them felt charged, dangerous. "You stepped into Elena's role. Willingly or not, you're now part of this. I switched a name tag, that's all. And that's all it takes." His voice dropped, quiet and final. "One wrong move, one misplaced identity, one moment of poor judgment, and everything changes." Madison stared at him, her mind spinning. "If I refuse?" Aidan's expression didn't change, but when he spoke, his words were edged with something dark. "Then I explained to the people waiting for Elena Morozov that the woman they met was an imposter. I give them your name, your address, your place of employment." He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "And I remove myself from the equation. What happens after that, it wouldn't be in my control." The threat hung in the air between them, unspoken but absolute. Madison's knees weakened. "You wouldn't." "I protect my interests," Aidan said quietly, "as long as I'm able." She wanted to scream, to run, to rewind the last 24 hours and make different choices. But she couldn't. So instead, she met Aidan Volkov's dark, unreadable eyes and asked the only question that mattered. "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe less. "And if we don't find her?" "Then there may be no clean way back." Madison's breath caught. "Permanently?" Aidan's silence was answer enough. Madison left the building at 1447 Ashford Place with a phone she didn't own, an identity she couldn't escape, and 72 hours to learn how to become someone else. The phone was sleek, black, encrypted. Aidan had handed it to her as she stood frozen in his office, her mind still reeling from the impossible choice he'd given her: cooperate or become a liability. "Use only this," he'd said, his voice flat, businesslike. "Your personal phone stays off, no social media, no contact with anyone from your previous life." "Previous life," Madison had repeated, the words tasting like ash. "You mean my actual life?" "Your actual life is suspended." Aidan's gaze had been unyielding. "For the next 2 weeks you are Elena Morozov. You work for Volkov Industries. You answer to me. Any deviation from that script puts both of us at risk." "At risk from who?" He hadn't answered. Now, standing on the subway platform with the encrypted phone burning a hole in her pocket, Madison felt the weight of her mistake pressing down like a physical thing. She thought switching name tags was an act of self-preservation, a way to hide from embarrassment, from Ryan's smug face and the pity of former co-workers. She'd been wrong. She'd traded embarrassment for danger, invisibility for exposure, and now she was trapped in a lie that belonged to someone else, someone who'd vanished without a trace. "Elena Morozov is missing." The word circled in Madison's mind as the train rattled through the tunnels. Missing didn't mean dead, it didn't mean kidnapped, but it also didn't mean safe. And the fact that Aidan Volkov, a man who clearly had resources, power and reach, couldn't find her suggested that wherever Elena was, she didn't want to be found. Or couldn't be. Madison's hands tightened around the phone. The train doors opened at her stop, and she stepped onto the platform, moving through the crowd on autopilot. Her apartment building loomed ahead, grey and tired, a stark contrast to the steel and glass tower she'd just left. She climbed the stairs elevator, broken again, and unlocked her door with fingers that still trembled. Inside, the studio felt smaller than usual, suffocating. Madison dropped her bag on the floor and sank onto her bed, staring at the encrypted phone as if it might detonate. It buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. "Tomorrow 8 a.m., same address, bring nothing. Tell no one." Madison's stomach twisted. She typed back, "What happens tomorrow?" The response came immediately. "You start learning how to survive." At 7:45 a.m., Madison stood outside 1447 Ashford Place again, dressed in the only professional clothes she owned that didn't scream junior associate desperately trying to look competent. Black trousers, white blouse, a blazer she'd bought on sale 3 years ago and barely wore because she never had anywhere important to go. Today apparently was important. The same guard was at the security desk. He recognized her instantly, waving her through without asking for ID. The elevator rose to the 30th floor. The doors opened. This time Aiden wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, late 30s, sharp-featured, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes tracked Madison's every movement with the precision of a predator assessing prey. "This is Irina," Aiden said. "She'll handle your preparation." Madison glanced between them. "Preparation for what?" "For not getting us killed," Irina replied, her accent thicker than Aiden's, each word clipped and cold. Madison's pulse spiked. Irina gestured toward the dining table, a sleek glass surface Madison hadn't noticed the day before. On it lay a stack of folders, a laptop, and what looked like a dossier thick enough to be a novel. "Sit," Irina commanded. Madison sat. Irina opened the first folder and slid a photograph across the table. It showed a woman in her early 30s, blonde, elegant, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that held a kind of quiet ferocity. "Elena Morozov," Irina said. "Born in Moscow, trained in economics at the London School of Economics, fluent in 5 languages, recruited by Volkov Industries 6 years ago as a consultant specializing in high-stakes negotiations." Madison stared at the photograph. Elena looked nothing like her. Different bone structure, different coloring, different presence entirely. "I don't look like her," Madison said quietly. "No," Irina agreed, "but the people you'll meet have never seen her in person. They've only reviewed dossiers, exchanged emails, participated in conference calls. They know her reputation, not her face." "Someone will notice." "Not if you're convincing." Irina leaned forward. "Elena Morozov is not warm. She does not smile to put people at ease. She does not apologize. She does not perform femininity to make men comfortable. Do you understand?" Madison nodded slowly. "Good, because the moment you start acting like yourself, nervous, accommodating, eager to please, you will be exposed, and exposure means consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Irina's expression didn't change, the kind that ends in a total and permanent disappearance. Madison's blood went cold. Aiden, who'd been standing by the windows, turned to face them. "Irina is exaggerating." "Am I?" Irina's gaze didn't leave Madison. "You didn't tell her who she'll be meeting." "I was getting to that." "Then get to it now." Aiden crossed the room and sat at the head of the table, his presence immediately commanding attention. He pulled the laptop toward him, typed something, and turned the screen toward Madison. On it was a photograph of a man in his 50s, silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms and political campaigns. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Victor Castor," Aiden said. "Real estate developer, philanthropist, art collector." He paused. "And the primary investor in a project Volkov Industries is acquiring." Madison studied the photograph. "He looks legitimate." "He is," Aiden replied. "On paper. In practice, Victor Castor has ties to organizations that prefer to remain unnamed. His money is clean. Where it comes from is not." "You're saying he's a criminal." "I'm saying he operates in gray areas, and he expects the people he does business with to do the same." Madison's throat tightened. "What does that have to do with me?" Victor requested a face-to-face meeting with Elena Morozov before finalizing the deal. He wants to confirm that Volkov Industries is represented by someone he can trust or control. Aiden's eyes locked on hers. "You will meet him in 3 days. You will convince him that you are Elena, and you will close the deal." "I'm not a negotiator." "You don't have to be. The terms are already set. You just have to not break character." Madison pushed back from the table, her body flooding with panic. "This is insane. I can't do this." "So you can," Irina said coldly. "Or you can explain to Victor Castor why Volkov Industries sent him an imposter. See how that goes." Madison's hands trembled. She looked at Aiden, searching for something, mercy maybe, or an exit she couldn't see. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why not hire someone, an actress, a professional?" "Because professionals leave trails," Aiden said quietly, "and because the people involved in this deal have intelligence networks that would identify a plant within hours. But you—" He gestured toward her. "You're nobody. No connections. No history in this world. You're invisible. Until I'm not." "Until you're not," Aiden agreed. "Which is why you'll be trained by Irina, by me, by anyone necessary to make sure you survive this." Madison stared at him, her mind racing. "And if I can't do it, if I fail—" Aiden's expression hardened. "Then we both pay the price." The next 72 hours were a nightmare dressed as education. Irina drilled Madison relentlessly, teaching her Elena's mannerisms, her speech patterns, the way she held silence like a weapon instead of filling it with nervous chatter. They practiced conversations, dissected photographs, memorized details about deals Madison didn't understand, and people she'd never meet. "Elena doesn't fidget," Irina snapped during one session. "She doesn't touch her hair, she doesn't smile unless it serves a purpose. Stop performing anxiety." "I am anxious," Madison shot back. "Then learn to hide it." Aiden appeared, intermittently observing from the periphery, correcting details Irina missed, asking questions designed to break Madison's composure. "What does Elena think of Victor Castor?" he asked during one simulation. "She thinks he's dangerous," Madison replied. "Wrong, she thinks he's useful. Danger is irrelevant, utility is everything." By the third day, Madison's reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. She'd stopped tucking her hair behind her ears, stopped apologizing when she spoke, stopped shrinking herself to fit into spaces that didn't want her. She stood taller, spoke less, held eye contact until the other person looked away first. It felt like wearing armor made of ice. On the morning of the meeting, Irina handed Madison a garment bag. Inside was a dress, black, structured, expensive, the kind of thing Elena Morozov would wear to a negotiation that doubled as psychological warfare. "Put it on," Irina said, "and remember, you are not Madison Clark, you are not a victim. You are Elena Morozov, and you do not break." Madison dressed in silence, her hands steady for the first time in days. When she emerged from the bathroom, Aiden was waiting. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze sweeping from her face to her posture, to the way she held her shoulders back instead of curling inward. "Good," he said finally. "Now let's see if you can sell it." Victor Castor's office was located in a historic building in the heart of the financial district, all marble columns and vaulted ceilings, the kind of place designed to remind visitors that power had always lived here. Madison entered, flanked by Aiden and Irina, her heels clicking against polished floors, her expression carefully neutral. They were escorted to a private conference room where Victor waited, seated at the head of a long table, flanked by two men who looked less like assistants and more like enforcers. Victor rose as they entered, his smile wide and empty. "Ms. Morozov," Victor said, extending a hand. "I admit I expected someone different." Madison didn't flinch. "We've never met in person," she replied calmly. "Our correspondence has always been remote." Victor studied her for a long moment, his gaze sharp, invasive. Then he smiled faintly. "Of course," he said. "Discretion suits this kind of business." Victor's eyes flickered, assessing, calculating. Then he gestured toward the table. "Shall we begin?" The conference room smelled of leather and old money. Madison sat across from Victor Castor, her hands resting on the table, her posture erect but not rigid. Beside her, Aiden occupied space the way some men occupied thrones, silent, watchful, radiating control. Irina sat to her left, a living reminder that one wrong word could dismantle everything. Victor smiled like a man who knew secrets. "I must admit," he said, his accent carrying the weight of old European wealth, "when Aiden told me Elena Morozov would be joining us, I was skeptical. Your reputation suggests someone who prefers shadows to spotlights." Madison didn't flinch. "Reputation and reality are often different, Mr. Castor." "Are they?" Victor leaned back, fingers steepled. "Then perhaps you can clarify for me. What exactly is your role in this transaction?" It was a test. Madison felt it in the way Victor's eyes tracked her micro-expressions, searching for hesitation, inconsistency, fear. "I ensure terms are met," Madison replied, her voice flat, disinterested. "Nothing more, nothing less. And if terms aren't met? Then there is no deal." Victor's smile widened. "Direct, I appreciate that." He glanced at Aiden. "She's different than I expected." "How so?" Aiden's tone was neutral, but Madison caught the edge beneath it, a warning maybe, or curiosity, about where Victor was steering the conversation. "Younger, less—" Victor gestured vaguely. "Severe." "Severity is a choice," Madison said before Aiden could respond. "Not a requirement." The room went quiet. Victor studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no warmth. "I like her," he said to Aiden. "She has spine." One of Victor's enforcers, a broad-shouldered man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, leaned forward and slid a folder across the table. Victor opened it, revealing documents Madison didn't recognize. Contracts, blueprints, financial projections printed on expensive paper. "The property in question," Victor said, tapping the blueprints, "is valued at 42 million. Volkov Industries has offered 30. I'm willing to accept 35 with conditions." Aiden's expression didn't change. "What conditions?" "I want assurance that the development will proceed as planned. No delays, no restructuring, no surprises." "That's standard," Aiden replied. "Standard for legitimate transactions. This one," Victor's gaze slid to Madison, "requires discretion." Madison felt Irina's warning like a hand on her spine. "Don't react, don't ask questions. Elena would already know what he means." "Discretion is guaranteed," Madison said evenly. "Good." Victor closed the folder. "Then we have an understanding." He extended his hand. Madison reached for it, then stopped. Every instinct screamed at her to complete the gesture, to seal the deal and escape this room before Victor's scrutiny peeled back her performance. But something in Aiden's stillness made her hesitate. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His gaze was fixed on Victor with the intensity of someone reading a language written in silence. Madison withdrew her hand slowly. "Before we finalize," she said, her voice colder than she'd intended, "I need clarification on the discretion clause." Victor's smile faltered. "Clarification?" "You mentioned no surprises. I want to ensure that applies equally to both parties." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" "Meaning if Volkov Industries is expected to maintain silence, I need assurance that your network will do the same." The air in the room shifted, pressure dropping, temperature falling. Victor's enforcers straightened in their chairs. Irina's hand moved fractionally closer to her briefcase. Aiden remained motionless, but Madison felt the weight of his attention like heat against her skin. "My network," Victor said slowly, "is not your concern. That is if it becomes mine." Victor leaned forward. "Are you questioning my integrity, Ms. Morozov?" Madison held his gaze. "I'm ensuring mutual accountability. Integrity is assumed." For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then Victor laughed again, louder this time, genuine. "You're right," he said, leaning back. "She does have spine." He looked at Madison with something approaching respect. "Very well. Mutual accountability. I'll have the revised terms drafted by end of day." He stood, signaling the meeting's end. Aiden rose smoothly, buttoning his jacket. Madison followed his lead, her legs steadier than she'd expected. Victor extended his hand again. This time Madison took it. "Welcome to the table, Ms. Morozov," Victor said. "I look forward to our continued partnership." Madison nodded once, released his hand and turned toward the door. She didn't exhale until they were in the elevator. The ride down was silent. Madison stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors, her face pale, her expression carefully blank. Beside her, Aiden stood with his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the descending numbers. Irina checked her phone, her jaw tight. The doors opened onto the lobby. Aiden didn't speak until they were outside, standing on the sidewalk where the noise of the city swallowed their words. "That was reckless," he said quietly. Madison turned to him, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. "You told me to be Elena. Elena wouldn't have signed without clarification. Elena would have known better than to challenge Victor Castor in front of his men." "Then maybe Elena isn't as smart as you think." Aiden's eyes darkened. "Or maybe you don't understand the game you're playing." "Then explain it to me," Madison snapped, her control fracturing. Because all I know is that I just sold my soul to a criminal, pretended to be someone I'm not, and somehow didn't get us all killed. So forgive me if I don't have the rulebook memorized." Irina stepped between them, her voice low and sharp. "Not here." She gestured toward a black car idling at the curb, sleek, expensive, windows tinted dark enough to be illegal. The driver stood beside it, his posture military straight. "Get in," Irina said. Madison climbed into the back seat. Aidan followed. The door closed with a heavy, final sound. The car pulled into traffic. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Aidan said, "You did well." Madison stared at him. "You just said I was reckless." "You were, but you were also right." He turned to face her, and for the first time since they'd met, his expression wasn't cold. It was something else, something that looked almost like approval. "Victor respects strength. If you'd accepted his terms without question, he would have seen you as weak. Exploitable. By pushing back, you earned his attention." "I don't want his attention." "Too late." Madison closed her eyes, her body suddenly heavy with the weight of what she'd just done. "How much longer?" "Victor will finalize the revised terms tonight. Once the contracts are signed, the deal closes. After that—" Aidan hesitated. "After that, you're free to go." Madison opened her eyes. "You're lying." "I'm not." "Then why does it feel like I just walked deeper into a cage?" Aidan held her gaze, and in his silence Madison found her answer. Because she had. The car stopped outside an address Madison didn't recognize, a brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, where trees lined the streets and the buildings wore ivy like armor. "Where are we?" Madison asked. "Somewhere safe," Aidan replied. He opened the car door and stepped out. "Come on." Madison followed, her instincts screaming warnings she couldn't articulate. The brownstone looked ordinary, well-maintained, anonymous, but the way Aidan moved toward it suggested it was anything but. He unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the space was elegant but austere. Hardwood floors, minimal furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes that looked read rather than decorative. The lighting was soft, warm, designed to create the illusion of safety. Madison stopped in the center of the living room, her arms crossed. "Why are we here?" "Because you can't go home," Aidan said, closing the door behind them. Madison's stomach dropped. "What?" "Victor's people will run background checks, deep ones. If they trace Elena Morozov to your apartment, to your life, they'll know something's wrong. You said I was invisible." "You were, until you met Victor." Aidan moved to the window, pulling the curtains closed. "Now you're on his radar, which means you need to disappear." "For how long?" "Until the deal closes, a week, maybe less." Madison's pulse hammered. "I can't just disappear. I have a job, a life." "Not anymore." The words hit her like a punch. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You expect me to stay here alone while you what, run your business? Pretend everything's normal?" Aidan turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You won't be alone." "Then who—" "Me." Madison froze. Aidan crossed the room, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "This is my safe house. I stay here when I need to disappear, and right now, you need to disappear with me." Madison's breath caught. "No. It's not a request. I don't trust you." "You don't have to." His voice dropped, quiet and final. "You just have to survive." Madison didn't sleep that night. She lay on the guest bed in a room that smelled of clean linen and something faintly cedar, staring at the ceiling while her mind replayed every moment of the past 4 days. The name tag, the gala, Aidan's office, Victor's smile, the lie she couldn't escape. Somewhere in the brownstone, Aidan was awake too. She could hear him moving soft footsteps, the muted sound of a door closing, the faint hum of a voice on a phone call conducted in a language she didn't understand. At 3 a.m., Madison gave up. She slipped out of bed and padded barefoot into the hallway, following the sound of Aidan's voice. It led her to a study small, lined with bookshelves, dominated by a desk where Aidan sat with his back to the door, phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in Russian fluid, sharp, edged with something that sounded like command. Madison froze in the doorway, suddenly aware that she was intruding. Aidan ended the call and turned. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "No." "Neither can I." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Madison hesitated, then sat. "Who were you talking to?" she asked. "Someone looking for Elena." Madison's chest tightened. Did they find her? No. Do you think she's alive? Aidan was quiet for a long moment, then he said, I don't know. The honesty startled her. If she's not, Madison said slowly, what happens to me? Aidan's gaze locked on hers. You become her. Permanently? Yes. Madison's hands curled into fists. And if I refuse? Then Victor Castor learns the truth, and people who lie to Victor Castor don't get second chances. So I'm trapped. Yes. Madison stood abruptly, her body flooding with anger, fear, helplessness. You could let me go right now. You could tell Victor the truth, take the loss, and let me disappear. I could, Aidan agreed, but I won't. Why? Because I don't lose. Madison stared at him, her breath coming fast. You're a monster. Aidan rose from his chair, rounding the desk until he stood in front of her. He was close, too close, but he didn't touch her. Yes, he said quietly, I am. And in his eyes Madison saw the truth of it. Not cruelty, not malice. Just cold, absolute certainty. He would sacrifice her to protect himself, to protect his empire, to protect whatever dark machinery kept Volkov Industries running. But beneath that certainty, Madison saw something else. Something that looked almost like regret. Go to bed, Madison, Aidan said, stepping back. Tomorrow we finish this. Madison left the study without another word. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, she realized something that made her pulse spike with equal parts terror and defiance. She didn't want to be Elena Morozov, but she was learning how to be dangerous. And that might be enough to survive. Morning arrived with the kind of silence that felt deliberate. Madison woke to sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains, her body stiff from a night spent half sleeping, muscles tensed against threats she couldn't name. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back. The brownstone. Aidan's safe house. The deal that had turned her life into something she no longer recognized. She showered in the guest bathroom, dressed in clothes someone had left folded on a chair, black trousers, a silk blouse, all perfectly sized, all completely wrong because they belonged to a woman who didn't exist. Eleanor's clothes, Elena's life. Madison stared at her reflection, searching for traces of who she'd been a week ago. The woman looking back was a stranger. Sharper eyes, harder mouth, shoulders that didn't curve inward anymore. She hated it. She hated that it worked. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of coffee. Aidan stood at the counter, dressed in dark trousers and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked. Madison searched for the word human, less like the untouchable figure from his office, and more like someone who existed in ordinary moments. It unsettled her more than his coldness ever had. Coffee? He asked without looking up. Yes. He poured a second cup, set it on the counter. Madison took it, wrapping her hands around the warmth. Victor's revised terms arrived an hour ago, Aidan said. The contracts are ready for signature. Madison's stomach tightened. When? Tonight, 7 p.m., his office. And after? After the deal closes, money transfers, properties change hands, and you're free to go. Madison sipped her coffee, the liquid bitter on her tongue. You keep saying that, but we both know it's not true. Aidan finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. What do you want me to say? The truth. The truth is complicated. Then simplify it. Aidan set his cup down, his movements deliberate. The truth is that once this deal closes, Victor Castor will have no reason to look for Elena Morozov, no reason to question who you are or where you came from. You'll be a footnote in a transaction that made him richer, and footnotes don't get investigated. Unless something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. You can't promise that. No, Aidan admitted. But I can control the variables, and right now you're the most unpredictable variable I have. Madison laughed short, bitter. Is that supposed to be a compliment? It's an observation. She set her coffee down, suddenly too restless to stand still. I want to know why. Why what? Why you're doing this? Why you didn't just let me walk away that first night? Why you dragged me into your world and then acted like it was inevitable? She turned to face him fully. You said you don't lose. But this... She gestured around the kitchen, at the life she'd been forced into. This isn't about winning, this is about control. Aidan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're right. The admission hung between them. When Elena disappeared, Aidan continued, his voice low, I had two choices: walk away from the deal and lose $30 million and the reputation that comes with failing to deliver, or find a replacement and hope no one noticed. He paused. Then you appeared, wearing her name, playing her role without even knowing what it meant, and I realized you weren't a complication. You were an opportunity. To use me. To survive. His gaze locked on hers. I built Volkov Industries from nothing. I clawed my way out of places you can't imagine to get here, and I will do whatever it takes to protect what I've built, even if that means making impossible choices. Like sacrificing me. Like protecting you. The words came out harder than she'd expected, edged with something that sounded almost like frustration. If I'd let you walk away, Victor's people would have found you within 48 hours. They would have asked questions, and when you couldn't answer them, they would have made you disappear permanently. So yes, I used you, but I also kept you alive. Madison's breath caught. She wanted to argue, to rage against the logic that made her captivity sound like salvation. But somewhere beneath the anger, she understood. Aiden Volkov wasn't her enemy. He was the only reason she wasn't already dead. What happens after tonight? Madison asked quietly. You go back to your life, I go back to mine. We never see each other again. Just like that. Just like that. Madison searched his face for deception, for the lie she knew had to be hiding beneath the promise. But all she saw was the same cold certainty that had defined him from the beginning. He meant it. And somehow that hurt worse than the alternative. The hours before the meeting crawled by with agonizing slowness. Irina arrived at noon, carrying another garment bag, and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. She drilled Madison through the final details: contract terms, signature protocols, exit strategies if something went wrong. Do not improvise, Irina said, her tone sharp. Do not engage in conversation beyond what's necessary. Sign the documents, confirm the terms, leave. And if Victor wants to talk, let Aiden handle it. Madison glanced at Aiden, who stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian. He looked, she struggled to name the quality tense, as if the weight of the impending meeting pressed on him the way it pressed on her. Does he always work like this? Madison asked. Irina followed her gaze. Always. Aiden doesn't sleep, he doesn't rest, he just moves forward. Toward what? Survival. Irina's expression softened fractionally. You think he's ruthless, and he is, but ruthlessness kept him alive when everyone else around him died. So don't mistake his control for cruelty. It's just the only way he knows how to exist. Madison absorbed that, the words settling somewhere deep. How long have you worked for him? She asked. 12 years. Do you trust him? Irina's smile was thin, sad. With my life, not with my heart. Before Madison could respond, Aiden ended his call and crossed the room. We leave in an hour, he said. Get ready. Victor Castor's office looked different at night. The marble columns cast long shadows, and the vaulted ceiling seemed to absorb sound, creating a cathedral-like hush that made every footstep echo. Madison walked beside Aiden, Irina a step behind, their small procession moving through hallways that felt more like corridors in a mausoleum than a place of business. Victor waited in the same conference room, flanked by the same enforcers, but tonight his smile was sharper, his eyes brighter with the satisfaction of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Ms. Morozov, he said, rising, right on time. Madison inclined her head. Punctuality is a courtesy. One I appreciate. Victor gestured toward the table where a stack of contracts lay waiting. Shall we conclude our business? Madison sat. Aiden took the chair beside her. Irina remained standing, her presence a silent reminder of the stakes. Victor slid the first contract across the table. Standard terms, he said. 35 million for the property. Development proceeds as outlined. Discretion maintained by all parties. Madison scanned the document, her eyes catching on clauses she barely understood, but had been trained to recognize. Everything matched what Irina had briefed her on. No surprises, no deviations. She picked up the pen Victor offered. Before you sign, Victor said, his tone casual, I have one question. Madison's hand froze. Yes? Victor leaned back, his gaze fixed on her face. How long have you been with Volkov Industries? The question hung in the air like a blade. Madison felt Aiden's stillness beside her, not panic but readiness. Irina shifted fractionally closer. 6 years, Madison said, her voice steady. 6 years, Victor repeated. And in that time you've handled how many deals of this magnitude? Enough to know when I'm being tested. Victor's smile widened. Smart, I respect that. He gestured toward the contract. Sign. Madison exhaled slowly and put pen to paper. Her signature, practiced, precise, nothing like her own, flowed across the line marked Elena Morozov, executive consultant. She slid the document back to Victor. He signed opposite her, his movements unhurried. Pleasure doing business with you, Victor said, extending his hand. Madison took it, her grip firm. Likewise. Victor's fingers tightened fractionally, not enough to hurt, but enough to remind her that power was always a negotiation. Then he released her. Aiden, Victor said, turning to him. I look forward to seeing the results of our partnership. Aiden nodded once. You won't be disappointed. They stood, exchanged final pleasantries, moved toward the door. Madison forced herself to walk slowly, her posture erect, her expression neutral. She didn't exhale until they were in the elevator, descending toward the lobby. Then her knees buckled. Aiden caught her, his hand on her elbow, steadying her. Easy, he murmured. I did it, Madison whispered. You did. The elevator doors opened. They stepped into the lobby, into the cool night air, into the black car waiting at the curb. Madison climbed inside, her body suddenly boneless with relief. It was over. She was free. But as the car pulled away from Victor Castor's building, Aiden's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed, something dark flickering behind his eyes. What? Madison asked. Aiden didn't answer immediately. He typed something, waited, read the response. Then he said very quietly, Elena Morozov is alive. Madison's heart stopped. What? She just made contact. She's in Prague. She wants to come home. The world tilted. If she comes back, Madison said slowly, her voice barely audible, Victor will know I'm not her. Aiden's gaze met hers, and in his eyes Madison saw the answer before he spoke. Yes. The car continued through the city, carrying them toward a future that had just shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The brownstone felt like a trap. Madison paced the living room, her mind racing through scenarios that all ended the same way. Exposed, hunted, disappeared. Across the room, Aiden stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and controlled as he spoke in Russian to someone who held answers he wouldn't share. Irina sat on the sofa, her face carved from stone, her silence more unsettling than any words could be. When Aiden finally ended the call, the room held its breath. Eleanor lands in 12 hours, he said, turning to face them. She's requested a meeting, private. Just her and me. Does she know, Madison asked, her voice tight, that someone's been using her identity? Aiden's jaw tightened. Not yet. But she will. Yes. Madison's hands curled into fists. Then Victor finds out, and when Victor finds out, he'll consider it a betrayal, Irina finished quietly. And betrayal in Victor's world is answered with blood. The word hung in the air like smoke. Madison sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. So that's it, I'm dead. No. Aiden's voice cut through the panic like a blade. You're not. How can you possibly... Because Elena doesn't want to come back. Madison's breath caught. What? Aiden crossed the room, his movements deliberate, and sat across from her. Elena disappeared because she was running, from Victor, from the deal, from something she saw or learned that made staying more dangerous than vanishing. He paused. She's only coming back now because I told her the deal is closed, that Victor got what he wanted, that she's no longer a liability. Then why meet with her at all? Because I need to know what she's running from. Aiden's gaze locked on Madison's. And because if Elena resurfaces publicly, Victor will ask questions. Questions I need to answer before he asks them. Madison's mind spun. You're going to pay her off, convince her to stay disappeared. Yes. And if she refuses? Aiden's expression didn't change, but his silence was answer enough. Madison's stomach turned. You'd kill her. I'd protect my interests. She's a person, not a variable. She's both. Aiden leaned forward, his voice dropping. Elena made a choice when she disappeared. She knew what it would cost, knew that vanishing would create chaos, put others at risk, force me to improvise. She chose herself over the consequences. I respect that. But I also won't let her choices destroy what I've built. Even if it means making someone disappear. Even if it means doing what is necessary to survive. Madison stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the man beneath the control. Not a monster, not a savior. Just someone who'd learned that the only way to survive was to become the thing others feared. "What do you need from me?" Madison asked quietly. "Stay here, don't contact anyone, don't leave. If Elena agrees to stay gone, you walk away from this with your life intact. If she doesn't..." Aiden hesitated. "Then we have a different conversation. About making me disappear too. About keeping you safe." Madison laughed, bitter, exhausted. "Is there a difference?" Aiden held her gaze. "I don't know yet." He left an hour later. Madison watched from the window as the black car pulled away, carrying Aiden toward a meeting that would decide whether she lived or died. Irina remained behind, a silent sentinel stationed between Madison and any illusion of freedom. "He'll do the right thing," Irina said after a long silence. Madison turned. "What's the right thing?" "Whatever keeps the most people alive." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be." Irina stood, moving to the kitchen. "Coffee?" "I don't think caffeine is going to help." "No, but sitting still will drive you insane." Madison followed her into the kitchen, accepting the mug Irina offered. They sat at the small table. The silence between them weighted with things neither could say. "How did you meet him?" Madison asked finally. Irina sipped her coffee, her expression distant. "Aiden pulled me out of a situation I couldn't escape on my own. Gave me a job, a life, a reason to stop running. And in return? In return, I gave him loyalty." Irina's eyes met Madison's. "Absolute, unquestioning. Because the world Aiden operates in doesn't allow for hesitation. Hesitation gets you killed." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Hesitating?" "No, I think you're surviving, which is more than most people manage." Madison absorbed that, the words settling like stones in her chest. "Do you think Elena will agree to stay gone?" she asked. Irina was quiet for a long moment. "I think Elena is smart enough to know that coming back means dying. Whether she's smart enough to accept that," she shrugged. "We'll see." Aiden returned 4 hours later. Madison was still awake, curled on the sofa with a book she hadn't read, her nerves too frayed for sleep. She heard the door open, heard Aiden's footsteps in the hallway, and knew before he entered the room what his expression would tell her. He looked tired. Not physically, Aiden never looked physically tired, but there was something in his eyes, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. "She agreed," he said quietly. Madison's breath left her in a rush. "She's staying gone?" "Yes, I offered her enough money to disappear permanently. A new identity, a clean break. She took it." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Aiden moved to the bar cart, poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He drank it in one swallow. "Elena is a survivor. She knows when to fold." Madison stood, her legs unsteady. "So it's over, I'm safe." "You're safe from Victor, from the deal, from immediate consequences." Aiden set the glass down, his gaze finding hers. "But you're not safe from what you know." Madison's pulse spiked. "What does that mean?" "It means you've seen things, met people, learned details about transactions that don't exist on paper, and that knowledge makes you dangerous." "I won't talk, I won't..." "I know." Aiden crossed the room, stopping close enough that Madison had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "But other people don't, which means you need to disappear too." Madison's throat tightened. "For how long?" 6 months, maybe a year. Long enough for memories to fade, for Victor to move on to other deals, for the people involved to forget Elena Morozov ever existed. "And then?" "Then you get your life back." Madison searched his face for the lie, for the trap she knew had to be hiding in the promise. But all she saw was exhaustion, and something that looked almost like regret. "Where would I go?" she asked. "Anywhere you want. I'll provide resources, money, documentation. A new identity if you need it." Aiden's voice softened fractionally. "You won't be alone. I'll make sure you're protected." "By who?" "By me." The words settled between them, weighted with implications Madison didn't have the energy to unpack. "I don't have a choice, do I?" she said. "You always have a choice." Aiden's gaze didn't waver. "But some choices come with consequences you can't survive." Madison closed her eyes, her body suddenly heavy with the weight of the past week. The lies, the fear, the version of herself she'd been forced to become. When she opened them again, Aiden was still watching her. "I'll do it," she said quietly. I'll disappear. Something flickered in Aiden's expression, relief maybe, or something darker. Good, he said, we leave tomorrow. That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind cycling through everything she was leaving behind. Her apartment, her job, her pathetic ordinary life that had felt suffocating a week ago and now seemed impossibly precious. At 2 a.m. she gave up. She padded downstairs, following the soft glow of light spilling from the study. Aiden sat at his desk reading something on his laptop, his profile sharp in the dim light. Madison stopped in the doorway. Can't sleep? Aiden asked without looking up. No. Neither can I. Madison stepped into the room, her bare feet silent on the hardwood. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Protecting me. You could just let me go, let Victor's people find me, let the consequences play out. Aiden finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. Is that what you think I should do? I think it would be easier. For who? For you. Aiden leaned back in his chair, studying her. You're right. It would be easier. I could cut you loose, clean my hands of the situation, and move on. He paused. But I won't. Why? Because you didn't ask for this. You made a stupid, impulsive decision to avoid your ex-fiancé, and it spiraled into something you couldn't control. And maybe... He stopped, something shifting in his expression. Maybe I'm tired of watching innocent people pay for my survival. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Madison moved closer, her heart pounding. You're not responsible for me. I know. Then why does it feel like you are? Aiden stood, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He was close, too close, but Madison didn't step back. Because from the moment you put on that name tag, Aiden said quietly, you became mine to protect, mine to keep alive, mine to make sure survives this. His hand lifted, hovering near her face, but not touching. And I don't know how to stop. Madison's breath caught. For a moment, a single suspended moment, something passed between them. Not attraction, not desire. Something rawer, more dangerous. Recognition. 2 people who'd learned to survive by becoming someone else, staring at each other across the wreckage of their choices. Then Aiden stepped back. Go to bed, Madison, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow everything changes. Madison left without another word. But as she climbed the stairs, she realized something that made her pulse spike with equal parts terror and inevitability. She didn't want to leave. Not because she was safe here, but because for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her, really looked and seen not what she could provide, not what she could perform, but who she was beneath the masks. And that was more dangerous than Victor Castor's threats. That was the kind of thing that made you stay when every instinct screamed to run. Morning came with the weight of finality. Madison woke to the sound of movement downstairs, quiet, efficient, the rhythm of someone preparing for departure. She dressed in the clothes laid out for her, each piece chosen by someone who understood that disappearing required looking like you belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Neutral colors, simple cuts, nothing memorable. When she descended the stairs, Aiden was in the kitchen, 2 travel bags packed and waiting by the door. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, his usual armor of expensive suits replaced by something that made him look less like a corporate predator and more like someone who could vanish into crowds without leaving a trace. We leave in 20 minutes, he said, not looking up from his phone. Irina will meet us at the airport. Where are we going? Madison asked. Somewhere Victor Castor's network doesn't reach. That's not an answer. That's the only answer you get until we're airborne. Aiden finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. Trust is a luxury right now, even for you. Madison wanted to argue, to demand the truth she'd been denied since this nightmare began. But something in Aiden's posture, the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze kept returning to his phone, told her this wasn't about control. It was about fear. Aiden Volkov was afraid. And that terrified her more than anything else. They drove in silence, the city passing in streaks of grey and glass beyond tinted windows. The driver different from before, younger, with military precision, in every movement, navigated through morning traffic, with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. Many times. Madison watched the world slip past, feeling the distance grow with every mile. Her apartment, her job, the life she'd complained about but never actually wanted to lose. all of it receding like a shoreline viewed from a departing ship. "What did you tell Elena?" Madison asked suddenly. Aidan glanced at her. "What?" "When you met her. What did you tell her to make her agree to stay gone?" Aidan was quiet for a moment. "The truth." "Which is?" "Then Victor Castor destroys people who make him look foolish, and that by disappearing during the deal, Elena made him look very foolish." Aidan's jaw tightened. She understood. Survival always makes sense to people who've had to fight for it. "Is that what you're doing? Fighting for survival?" "Every day." Madison studied his profile. The sharp angles, the controlled expression, the way he held himself like a man who'd learned not to relax, because relaxation meant vulnerability. "What are you running from?" she asked quietly. Aidan's hands tightened on his phone. "Everything." The answer hung between them, too honest to be anything but truth. The airport wasn't the main terminal. They pulled into a private airfield on the city's outskirts, where sleek jets sat like predatory birds, and the only security came from men who looked like they'd been trained to kill first and ask questions never. Irina waited beside a Citation X, her expression as severe as always, but her eyes tracking their arrival with something that might have been relief. "On time," she said as they exited the car. "Good." "Any problems?" Aidan asked. "None. Your flight plan is filed. You'll land in Reykjavik in 7 hours. Madison's breath caught. "Iceland?" "First stop," Irina said. "After that you'll move depending on how quickly Victor's people start asking questions." "They will ask questions," Aidan said. "It's a matter of when, not if." "Then you'd better move fast." Irina handed Aidan a phone different from the encrypted one Madison had been using. Sleeker, more anonymous. "Everything you need is on here. Contacts, routes, safe houses across 8 countries. Use them in order. Don't deviate." Aidan took the phone, his expression grim. "And if something goes wrong?" "Then you're on your own." The words should have sounded harsh. Instead, they sounded like the only truth anyone in this world could offer. Irina turned to Madison, her severe features softening fractionally. "You did better than I expected." "Is that a compliment?" Madison asked. "It's a fact." Irina extended her hand. "Stay alive, it would be a waste if you didn't." Madison took her hand, the grip firm, brief. "Thank you." Irina's smile was thin, sad. "Don't thank me yet. Surviving the next 6 months is going to be harder than anything you've done so far." She turned and walked toward the waiting car, leaving Madison and Aidan standing on the tarmac with a plane and a future neither of them could predict. The Citation X was luxury disguised as efficiency. Madison settled into a leather seat that probably cost more than her annual rent. Watching as Aidan conferred with the piloter woman in her 40s with the calm competence of someone who'd flown through worse than corporate espionage and mafia negotiations. When Aidan finally sat across from her, the engines were already humming. 7 hours, he said. "Sleep if you can." "I can't." "Try anyway." The plane began to taxi, and Madison watched the city disappear through the window. First the buildings, then the skyline, then the entire world she'd known reduced to a map of lights growing smaller and smaller until they blinked out entirely. She was gone. Erased. A footnote in someone else's story. "What happens when we land?" Madison asked, her voice barely audible over the engines. "We find a place to stay, we wait. We see if Victor's people come looking." "And if they do?" "Then we move again." "For how long?" Aidan met her gaze. "As long as it takes." Madison closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave, but beneath the exhaustion was something else, something she couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite relief. Anticipation, maybe. The terrifying, intoxicating awareness that for the first time in her life she wasn't running from something. She was running towards something she didn't yet understand. She woke to Aidan's voice, low and urgent. "Madison, we have a problem." Her eyes snapped open. The cabin was dark, lit only by the soft glow of emergency lighting. Through the window she could see nothing but clouds and night. "What's wrong?" she asked, her body flooding with adrenaline. Aidan held up his phone, the screen illuminated with a message in Cyrillic. "Victor's people are moving faster than I expected. They've started asking questions about Elena Morozov. Specifically, why she closed the deal in person when she's been unreachable for a week." Madison's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means someone talked, someone who saw you at the gala, someone who noticed inconsistencies." Aidan's jaw tightened. And it means we don't have 6 months. We have days, maybe less. Before what? Before Victor realizes he was lied to, and when he realizes that... Aiden stopped, his expression dark. We become targets. Madison's hands trembled. What do we do? Aiden was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on something beyond the window. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, stripped of control, edged with something raw. We make a choice. What choice? He turned to face her fully. We can keep running, disappear into Iceland, then Norway, then wherever the next safe house is. We can spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for Victor's people to find us. Or we go back. We face Victor. We tell him the truth or a version of it, and we gamble that his pragmatism outweighs his pride. Madison stared at him. That's insane. He'll kill us. Maybe. Or maybe he'll see that keeping us alive is more valuable than revenge. Aiden leaned forward. Victor is a businessman. He doesn't kill for pleasure. He kills to protect his interests. If we can convince him that we're more useful alive, that we have information, connections, leverage he doesn't, then we have a chance. That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only gamble we have. Madison's mind raced, cycling through options that all felt like variations of death. Run and die slowly, hunted across continents, return and die quickly, but on their own terms. What do you think we should do? She asked. Aiden's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through the control. I think I'm tired of running. I think I built an empire on the promise that I would never run again. And I think... He stopped, his gaze holding hers. I think I don't want you to spend the rest of your life afraid, because I dragged you into my world. The words hit Madison like a physical blow. Not because they were manipulative, not because they were calculated, but because they were real. If we go back, Madison said slowly, we go back together, as equals, not as boss and imposter, not as survivor and protector, as partners. Partners in what? In whatever comes next. Faden studied her face, searching for something, doubt maybe, or the fear he'd grown accustomed to seeing in people who stood too close to him. Instead, he found resolution. Partners, he repeated quietly. Yes. He extended his hand. Madison took it, her grip firm, her choice made. Then we go back, Aiden said, and we survive together. The plane changed course an hour later. Instead of Reykjavik, they would land back where they started, the city they'd fled, the world they couldn't escape. Madison watched the darkness beyond the window, her reflection staring back at her like a ghost. She wasn't Madison Clark anymore. The junior marketing associate who switched name tags to avoid her ex-fiancé had died the moment she walked into Aiden Volkov's office. But she wasn't Elena Morozov either. That identity had been borrowed, discarded, rendered irrelevant by the real woman's survival. She was something else now. Someone forged in the space between lies and truth, fear and defiance, running and standing still. She was whoever she chose to be. And for the first time in her life, that felt like power. Beside her, Aiden made a phone call, his voice low, controlled, speaking to someone in Russian with the authority of a man preparing for war. When he ended the call, he looked at Madison. Tomorrow, he said, we meet Victor. We tell him the truth and we see if truth is enough to keep us alive. Madison nodded. And if it's not? Aiden's smile was sharp, dangerous. Then we make him regret ever learning our names. They landed at dawn, when the city was still wrapped in the grey uncertainty between night and morning. The private airfield looked different in daylight, less like an escape route and more like a point of no return. Madison descended the plane's stairs on legs that felt steadier than they had any right to be, her body thrumming with adrenaline and something darker, the acceptance that she might not survive the next 24 hours. Aiden moved beside her, his presence solid, unwavering. He'd spent the last hour of the flight preparing, making calls, reviewing documents, constructing the narrative they would present to Victor Castor. Not a lie, not exactly, but a version of truth calibrated to appeal to a man who valued profit over pride. The car is waiting, Aiden said, gesturing toward a black sedan idling near the hangar. Same driver? No, someone I trust more. Madison glanced at him. I didn't think you trusted anyone. I don't, but some people have earned the right to prove me wrong. He paused. Like you. The words settled between them, quiet, unexpected, weighted with everything they hadn't said during the long flight back. Madison wanted to respond, to acknowledge the shift that had occurred somewhere over the Atlantic, But the driver was approaching, and the moment fractured into logistics and survival. They climbed into the car and drove toward the reckoning neither of them could avoid. Victor Castor's office building looked exactly as it had a week ago. Marble and power, old money and new cruelty, wrapped in architectural elegance. But this time Madison wasn't pretending. She wore her own clothes, the black dress from the gala, cleaned and pressed, a conscious choice to remind Victor of their first meeting. Her hair was pulled back, severe, no makeup, no mask, just the face of a woman who'd learned that survival required showing your teeth. Aidan had dressed with equal intention, dark suit, no tie, the collar of his shirt open in a way that suggested he wasn't here to beg. They walked into the building side by side, their steps synchronized, their postures radiating the kind of controlled aggression that made security guards step aside without being asked. The elevator rose in silence. At the 30th floor, the doors opened onto Victor's private reception area. His assistant, a thin man with the nervous energy of someone who'd witnessed too many people disappear, gestured toward the conference room. "Mr. Castor is expecting you," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm sure he is," Aidan replied. They entered. Victor stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, his silhouette framed by the city he controlled through money and fear. He didn't turn immediately. The silence stretched, deliberate and oppressive. Finally he spoke. "I had an interesting conversation this morning," Victor said, his accent thicker than usual, a sign Madison had learned of carefully contained rage. "With a colleague who attended the gala last week. He mentioned meeting Elena Morozov, described her in great detail." He turned, his eyes cold. "The description didn't match the woman I met." Madison's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. "Then your colleague has poor memory," Aidan said evenly. "Or excellent instincts." Victor moved toward them, each step measured. "Tell me, Aidan, who did I sign contracts with?" "Someone competent enough to close a $35 million deal without raising suspicion until now." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer that matters." Victor's jaw tightened. "You lied to me." "I improvised," Aidan corrected. "Elena Morozov was unavailable. I provided an alternative. The deal closed. You got what you wanted. What's the problem?" "The problem," Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous, "is that I don't do business with people who treat me like a fool." "I don't treat you like a fool," Aidan said. "I treat you like a pragmatist. You wanted the property. You got it. The name on the contract is irrelevant." "The name on the contract is everything." Victor's gaze shifted to Madison. "Who are you?" Madison stepped forward, her voice steady. "Someone who saved your deal from collapsing." "Saved it?" Victor laughed short, bitter. "You committed fraud." "I committed survival," Madison replied. "Elena Morozov disappeared. Aidan needed someone to stand in her place for one night. I did. The contracts are legal. The terms are fulfilled. Nothing about the deal changes, because I'm not the woman you expected. Everything changes when I discover I've been deceived. Then you're focused on the wrong thing." Madison's eyes locked on Victor's. "You're a businessman. You don't care about names. You care about results. And the result is that you own a $42 million property for $35 million. Your ego might be bruised, but your bank account is thriving. Which matters more?" The room went silent. Victor stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Aidan. "Where is the real Elena Morozov?" "Gone," Aidan said. "Permanently. She took a severance package and disappeared. You'll never see her again." "And this one?" Victor gestured toward Madison. "What do I do with her?" "Nothing," Aidan said. "She walks away, you walk away, we all pretend this conversation never happened. Just like that. Just like that." Victor was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving between them. Madison could feel him calculating, weighing pride against profit, revenge against pragmatism. "I could have you both killed," Victor said finally. "It would be easy, a phone call, and by morning it will be as if the two of you never existed." "You could," Aidan agreed, "but you won't." "Why not?" "Because I have something you want more than revenge." Victor's eyes narrowed. "What?" Aidan withdrew a folder from his jacket and placed it on the table. "Information on 3 of your competitors, deals they're negotiating, properties they're acquiring, weaknesses they don't know they've exposed." He paused. "Kill me, and this information disappears. Work with me and you gain leverage worth 10 times what you paid for that property." Victor opened the folder, his expression shifting as he scanned the contents. Madison held her breath. "This is accurate?" Victor asked. "Verified yesterday." Victor closed the folder, his fingers drumming against the leather surface. Then he looked at Madison. "And you, what do you offer?" Madison met his gaze without flinching. "Discretion, I disappear. I never speak about this deal, this meeting, or your business. You get what you wanted, and I get to keep breathing. Mutually beneficial." Victor studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then he smiled, cold, calculating but not without a trace of respect. "You have nerve," he said, "both of you. Stupid nerve, but nerve nonetheless." He extended his hand to Aiden. "The information buys you a pass this time, but if you ever lie to me again—" "I won't," Aiden said, taking his hand. Victor turned to Madison. "And you, disappear. If I see you again, if I hear your name connected to my business, if you so much as breathe in a way that suggests you remember this conversation, I will ensure your world crumbles in ways you cannot imagine." Madison nodded. "Understood." Victor released Aiden's hand and stepped back. "Get out, both of you, and consider yourselves fortunate that I value profit over pride." They left without another word. The elevator descended in silence. Madison's hands were shaking, reaction delayed, adrenaline crashing now that the danger had passed. Beside her, Aiden stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. When the doors opened onto the lobby, Madison's legs nearly buckled. Aiden caught her elbow, steadying her. "Easy," he murmured. "We did it," Madison whispered. "We survived." They walked out into the morning light, the city waking around them, oblivious, indifferent, continuing as if the last 2 weeks hadn't rewritten the course of Madison's entire existence. The black sedan waited at the curb. "Where to?" the driver asked as they climbed inside. Aiden glanced at Madison. "Where do you want to go?" Madison stared out the window, watching the city pass the buildings, the people, the life she thought she wanted before she learned what she was capable of. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Then we'll figure it out." Aiden's voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Together." Madison turned to face him, seeing clearly for the first time the man beneath the armor. Not a monster, not a savior, just someone who'd fought for survival so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stop running. "Together," she repeated. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Madison smiled, not the performance she'd worn as Elena Morozov, but something real, something that belonged entirely to her. 3 months later, the cafe in Prague was small, tucked into a cobblestone street where tourists rarely wandered. Madison sat by the window, a book open in front of her, coffee cooling in her cup. She looked different, hair shorter, lighter, styled in a way that made her face seem older, sharper. She wore jeans and a leather jacket, clothes that belonged to someone who'd learned to move through the world without leaving traces. The bell above the door chimed. Aiden entered, scanning the room with the automatic caution of someone who'd survived too many close calls. When his eyes found Madison, something in his expression softened. He sat across from her, ordering coffee in flawless check. "Any problems?" he asked. "None. You?" "Victor's people stopped looking 2 weeks ago. As far as they're concerned, we're ghosts." "Good." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between people who'd seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. "I heard from Marina," Aiden said finally. "She wants to know if you're interested in consulting work, legitimate this time." Madison raised an eyebrow. "Consulting for Volkov Industries?" "Consulting for me." "Doing what?" "Whatever you want." Aiden's gaze held hers. "You're good at this, Madison, better than you think. You could build something, a career, a life, something that belongs to you." Madison sipped her coffee, considering. "And you, what are you building?" "Something different." Aiden leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "I spent 20 years fighting to survive. Maybe it's time to figure out how to live." "With me?" "If you'll have me." The words hung between them. Not a declaration, not a promise, but an offer. A choice freely given, with no coercion, no manipulation, no desperate bargaining for survival. Just two people who'd met in the worst possible circumstances and somehow found their way to something that looked almost like peace. Madison closed her book, her decision made. "Partners," she said, extending her hand. Aiden took it, his grip warm, steady. "Partners," he agreed. And in the small cafe in Prague, with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the city humming with life beyond the glass, Madison Clark, who'd once been Elena Morozov, who'd once been nobody, finally became exactly who she was meant to be. Someone who survived. Someone who chose. Someone free. 6 months after that morning in Prague, a package arrived at Victor Casta's office. Inside was a single photograph, Madison and Aidan standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, smiling like people who'd earned the right to stop looking over their shoulders. On the back, written in neat handwriting, was a single sentence. "Thank you for teaching us that survival isn't about hiding. It's about becoming someone worth remembering." Victor stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then he smiled cold, calculating but not without a trace of respect, and placed it in his desk drawer. Some people, he thought, earned the right to disappear, and some people earned the right to be seen. He closed the drawer and returned to work, the photograph forgotten but the lesson remembered. Never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. They might just surprise you.
A black dress like no one would notice the change. Crystal lights above her, 500 wolves in suit. She was scared of danger. She was scared of...
This fictional story is created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, companies, and events are entirely imaginary. Any resemblance to real individuals, organizations, or situations is purely coincidental. The narrative includes dramatic elements of power